My name is Lila Delgado. I'm 27, born and raised in Seattle, working as a junior architect. I thought my family was the one thing that would never betray me. That belief died the night I opened my phone and saw my parents and my sister laughing under a banner that said, "Happy engagement, Lila." But the girl in the photo wasn't me. It was my younger sister, Renee, wearing the ring I designed months ago for my own proposal that never happened. My mom wrote, "Finally, the right daughter got the happy ending she deserves." I stared at that caption until the screen blurred. My hands shook, not from sadness, but from something darker, clarity. If your family publicly replaced you like that, would you forgive them or make them remember who you really are? It started with a ping from my phone, a Facebook notification. My sister, Renee, had been tagged in a photo. I opened it absent-mindedly, half expecting a harmless throwback. But the picture froze my blood. There they were, my parents, my cousins, even the neighbors standing under a golden banner that read, "Happy engagement, Lila." Except, the Lila in that photo wasn't me. It was Renee, smiling ear to ear, wearing the same ring I had designed months ago for my own proposal. The caption underneath came from my mother, Alina Delgado. "Finally, the right daughter got the happy ending she deserves." I read it 3 times before it truly sank in. My chest felt hollow, like the air had been punched out of me. I could hear my own heartbeat louder than the rain outside. They had thrown an engagement party for my sister, using my design, my ring, on my birthday week. The first emotion wasn't sadness. It was disbelief. Then came the humiliation. I scrolled through the photos. Every angle showed them laughing, toasting, celebrating. My dad had even baked the cake, a rare thing he only did for special occasions. I waited for one tag, one mention, one text message saying, "Hey, sorry we couldn't invite you tonight." Nothing, not even a ghost of acknowledgement. I put my phone down on the counter. The hum of the refrigerator was deafening. My apartment felt colder than usual, or maybe it was just me freezing from the inside out. I reached for a glass of water, but my hand shook so badly it spilled everywhere. A message popped up, not from my family, but from an old friend. "Hey, saw the engagement post." "Congrats to your sis. Wait, wasn't that your ring design?" That question burned. I didn't even bother replying. For a few minutes, I stared out the window, trying to reason it out. Maybe it was a misunderstanding, maybe someone mislabeled the banner. But no, my mom's words were too deliberate. The right daughter. She'd always used that phrase like a blade, sharp and careful. I was the one who didn't fit her mold, too serious, too focused on work, not soft enough. When I finally unlocked my phone again, my mother's latest comment was pinned to the post. "Renee makes everyone proud. She deserves everything good that comes her way." That was it. The final confirmation that this wasn't a mistake. It was a message. I opened the group chat my family used, Delgado Clan. My last message in there was from months ago. "Hey, I got promoted today." No one had replied, not even a thumbs up emoji. I typed slowly. "Did anyone remember today's date?" No one answered. After 20 minutes of silence, I added another line. "It's okay, I get it now." Then I locked my phone, grabbed my keys, and stood by the door. My reflection in the hallway mirror looked like a stranger, same dark eyes, same tired ponytail, but something had shifted. There was steel behind the sadness. I whispered to myself, almost like a vow, "If they've replaced me, I'll show them what they lost." I slipped on my coat, rain still tapping against the glass, and drove toward the house I once called home, the Delgado estate on Lakeside Avenue. I hadn't been there in months, not since the breakup with Mark. As I drove through the misty streets, flashes of childhood came back, birthdays where I blew out candles alone because Renee wasn't feeling well. The times I presented straighter report cards while Mom fussed over Renee's dance trophies. I told myself it didn't matter. That love wasn't a competition. But that night, love felt like a scoreboard I had never been allowed to win. When I reached the house, cars lined the driveway. Laughter spilled through the rain. Through the big bay window, I saw my mother adjusting Renee's veil-like shawl, my father filming on his phone, and Mark, yes, Mark, standing behind Renee, his hand around her waist. The same hand that once promised me forever. My pulse thudded in my ears. My grip tightened on the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white. For a second, I thought about turning back, pretending I never saw any of it. But that version of me, the quiet, obedient daughter, had already died the moment my mother typed the right daughter. I stepped out of the car. Rain soaked through my coat, but it didn't matter. I walked toward the front door, every step heavier than the last. And that's when I realized I wasn't going home to make peace. I was going back to collect what was mine. The porch light flickered when I stepped under it, casting pale gold against the rain streaming down my face. For a second, I hesitated. The laughter from inside was muffled but constant, glasses clinking, someone playing a bad remix of Ed Sheeran. The smell of baked vanilla and cheap champagne drifted through the door. I took a deep breath, wiped my face with my sleeve, and turned the handle. The music hit first. Then silence. Every head turned toward me mid-toast, mid-laugh, the air freezing like the room itself had been caught doing something forbidden. My heels clicked softly against the hardwood floor, echoing louder than any sound. "Lila," my mother's voice cracked slightly, as if saying my name was a mistake. "Hi, Mom," I smiled faintly. "Nice party." Renee stood near the cake table, eyes wide. She looked stunning, of course, always did. My mother's perfect daughter, tall, soft-spoken, a halo of golden curls around her smug little face. She clutched her champagne flute, pretending it didn't tremble. I glanced at the banner hanging behind her. "Congratulations, Renee and Mark." And underneath, smaller print, finally right, the same word again. "Right." Mark cleared his throat, stepping forward, wearing that awkward grin he always used when cornered. "Lila, hey, this isn't what it looks like." "Oh," I tilted my head, voice steady. "Because it looks exactly like an engagement party for my ex-fiancé, in my parents' house, with my family." The room was quiet enough to hear the rain hitting the windows. Dad set his drink down, trying to mediate. "Lila, sweetheart, it just happened. They fell in love. You can't control—" "I'm not trying to control anything," I cut him off. "I'm just surprised you managed to plan a whole party without remembering I exist." Mom inhaled sharply. "Don't start this drama tonight." It's Renee's moment. There it was, the phrase she used my whole life to silence me. "Don't ruin it, don't start drama." I stepped closer, each word colder. "You know, I used to think I wasn't enough, that maybe if I worked harder you'd notice me, but now I see it's simpler than that. I was never the daughter you wanted." Her jaw tightened. "That's ridiculous." "Really?" I reached into my purse and pulled out a small velvet box. Inside, my original ring design. I held it up for everyone to see. "Recognize this? It's my blueprint. You even used my initials on the engraving." Renee's face turned white. "Lila, please, it wasn't." "It was what?" I snapped. "It wasn't betrayal or theft." Mark shifted uncomfortably. "I told her about your design, but she didn't know you still had the sketch. So you did show her my design." He stammered. "I didn't mean, save it." I snapped the box shut, the sound sharp like thunder. Every face in the room looked away, except my mother. She held my gaze, unflinching, daring me to make a scene. So I did. I lifted my glass from the table, filled it halfway with champagne, and raised it. "To the perfect couple," I said, smiling thinly. "May your love last longer than your conscience." Gasps rippled through the guests. Someone tried to laugh it off, but the tension was too thick. I took a slow sip, then set the glass down. "You all can relax," I added, voice steady. "I'm not here to ruin anything. I just came to collect something that's mine." Mom frowned. "What are you talking about?" "My dignity," I said quietly, "and maybe a few things I left in my old room." I walked past her before she could respond. My old room was upstairs, the same pale blue walls, same crooked photo frame of me and Renee from high school back when we still pretended to like each other. Everything smelled faintly of lavender and dust. The drawer where I used to keep my sketches was half open, empty. I wasn't surprised. Renee must have taken them. I sat on the bed for a moment, staring at the dent on the wall where I'd once thrown a mug after a fight with Mom. I was 16 then, furious because she'd canceled my art competition trip to pay for Renee's ballet lessons. Some things never changed. A soft knock on the door. "Dad." "Sweetheart, can we talk?" I didn't look up. "If it's about forgiveness, don't waste your breath." He sighed, stepping in. "It's not that simple. Your mother, under pressure. She wants everyone to see us as perfect." I finished for him. "That word again. You've built this perfect picture and painted me out of it." He rubbed his temples. "Lila, please don't do something you'll regret." I finally looked at him. "The only regret I have is thinking you'd ever stand up for me." He flinched but said nothing. When he left, I opened my closet, grabbed my old box of sketchbooks, and tucked it under my arm. As I walked back downstairs, everyone avoided my eyes. Renee was crying quietly, Mom whispering something harsh in her ear. Mark tried to say my name again, but I brushed past him. Before stepping outside, I turned once more toward them. "I'm not angry anymore," I said, voice calm, almost tender. "I'm awake." Then I walked into the rain, closing the door behind me. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat on my living room floor, flipping through my old sketches, house blueprints, furniture layouts, dream homes I'd designed for other people. Every single one had one thing in common: strong foundations. Because if the base cracks, the whole structure falls apart. And that's when it hit me, my family had always been cracked. I just never wanted to see it. For the first time, I wondered if I could rebuild something new, not with them, but after them. The next morning, the world looked the same: gray sky, light drizzle, coffee shop smells drifting through my cracked window, but inside me something had shifted. I wasn't the same woman who'd gone to bed believing family meant safety. My phone buzzed before I even reached for it. A message from my colleague, Tessa. "Hey, you might want to check this. Someone's using your design file for the new cityscape proposal." I frowned. My design file? I opened my laptop, heart thudding. The file Tessa sent over was unmistakably mine. The layout, the measurements, even the small watermark in the corner, LD27. Only one person outside my team had access to those blueprints: my sister. Renee had begged me for reference sketches months ago for a design course she claimed to be taking. I'd sent her simplified drafts, never thinking she'd use them. But this file wasn't simplified, it was the full version. I stared at the timestamp. She submitted it 3 days ago to a firm called Amber & Co. Design, my former employer's biggest rival. My stomach twisted. This wasn't an accident. I called Tessa. "Who forwarded this to you?" "Someone from Amber & Co. sent it to the city office for permit approval. I recognized your layout right away. Thought you'd want to know." "Thanks," I said, voice barely steady. After the call, I sat in silence for a long time. I wanted to cry again, but there were no tears left. There was only rage, and beneath that, a strange clarity, the kind that comes when everything you believed in burns down. At noon, I went to my firm. The office was buzzing, but every sound felt distant. My boss, David, called me in. "Lila, you okay? You look pale." "I'm fine," I lied. "Just didn't sleep." He hesitated. "I saw Renee's post this morning. I wasn't sure if you'd—" "Let's not," I interrupted softly. "Please," he nodded. But later that day, as I was drafting a new layout, a thought kept pulsing through my mind like a heartbeat. They took everything, even your work. When the rain returned that evening, I couldn't take it anymore. I drove to Amber & Co., the glass tower gleaming under the storm. I walked in without an appointment, ignoring the receptionist's protests. "Can I help you, ma'am?" she said nervously. "Yes, I'm here to see Mr. Latham, the director." He appeared minutes later, tall, polished, the type who smiled with his teeth, not his eyes. "Miss Delgado, I wasn't expecting. Someone in your firm submitted a project using my designs," I said flatly. "I want to know who." His smile faded. "That's a serious accusation." "I have proof." I placed my tablet on his desk, pulling up both files, my original and theirs. Identical down to the pixel, unless you think it's a coincidence that your architect also has initials LD27. He studied the screen, jaw tightening. "I'll look into it." "Do that," I said, turning away, "and check who gave her the file." His voice followed me as I reached the door. "Her name's Renee Delgado, right?" I froze. He didn't need to check anything. He already knew. That night, I drove straight to my father's house. I didn't even bother calling first. He was in the garage fixing an old car, humming off-key like always. When he saw me, he looked tired, guilty tired. "Lila," he said quietly. "You shouldn't be here." "I just found out Renee used my work. You knew, didn't you?" He sighed. "Your mother asked me not to tell you." "Of course she did. Do you have any idea what this means for me if my firm finds out?" "Your sister was struggling," he interrupted. "She lost her job months ago. Your mom was trying to help her get back on her feet." "By stealing from me?" I snapped. He wiped his hands on a rag, eyes heavy with something I couldn't name. "We didn't mean harm." "You never mean harm," I said, voice breaking. "But you always choose her over me." He didn't answer. He just looked away as if the truth itself was too ugly to face. I left before he could say another word. The rain blurred the streetlights as I drove, everything glowing gold and red through the tears I refused to shed. When I got home, I poured myself a glass of whiskey and opened my bank app. Something inside me whispered that this wasn't over. And it was. Because the moment the numbers loaded, my chest tightened. My savings account, the one I'd shared with Mom for family expenses, was almost empty. $62,843 gone. The withdrawal note read, "Transfer to RDLGADO." That's when the world went completely silent. I stared at the screen until my reflection warped against the glow. In one night, they had stolen my ring, my work, and now my future. I set the glass down slowly, fingers trembling, heart. Then I whispered to the empty room, "All right, Mom, if this is a game, I'll play." That night, I opened a folder on my computer labeled Home. It contained every design I'd ever made, proof of my creativity, my legacy. But now, home felt like the cruelest word of all. I renamed the folder Rebuild. Because that's what I was about to do, not just rebuild my career, but rebuild myself brick by brick. I didn't sleep. My mind spun like the blueprints I'd drawn 100 times. lines crossing, overlapping, but always leading back to one point, the foundation. Every structure starts there. And mine had just cracked wide open. By dawn, I was already making coffee, fingers trembling not from caffeine, but from fury disguised as focus. I opened my laptop and began collecting every trace of what they'd done, screenshots, bank transfers, emails. If my mother and sister wanted to play dirty, I could be meticulous too. At 8, I called the bank. The woman on the line sounded bored until I mentioned fraud, then everything sped up. She confirmed that the transfer had been made in person, signed by my mother. It was authorized under joint ownership, she said apologetically. We can't reverse it without legal action. Legal action. The words hung there like an invitation. After hanging up, I looked up a name I hadn't thought of in years, Samantha Quinn, my law school roommate before I switched to architecture. She was now a family law attorney in Seattle. I texted her, explaining everything in one blunt paragraph. She called within minutes. Jesus, Lila, she said. They emptied your account. That's theft, even if it's under joint access. You can freeze it immediately. I'll file the paperwork today. Her calm voice steadied me. And about the stolen designs? I asked. That's intellectual property violation. Do you have proof you created them first? I smiled grimly. I keep every timestamp. Good, then we'll hit them on both fronts. But Lila, be ready. Family fights are the dirtiest kind. I already learned that, I said. By afternoon, I'd changed passwords, closed shared accounts, and filed a report with her firm. My phone buzzed constantly, calls from Mom, then Dad, then finally Renee. I ignored them all until one message appeared. You're making a mistake. You're destroying our family. I stared at it, then typed back, our family was destroyed the day you wore my ring. No response came after that. The next day, I received a text from Mom, we need to talk. Come home, I almost laughed. Home, that word again. Still, I went. Not because I wanted reconciliation, but because I needed to look her in the eye when I told her she no longer had control over me. When I walked into the living room, Mom was sitting straight-backed on the sofa, a glass of white wine in hand even though it was only noon. Renee sat beside her, tear-streaked and silent. Dad hovered near the window, pretending to check his phone. So, Mom began coolly, you've decided to sue your own family? I've decided to protect myself, I said. You're overreacting, she said sharply. We borrowed the money to help Renee. She'll pay you back. She won't, I said, pulling a printout from my bag. Because she's been unemployed for 6 months, I confirmed it with her old boss. Renee's head shot up. You called him? Yes, he told me you were fired for falsifying reports, and Mom covered it up, didn't you? Mom's face paled. You don't understand. I understand perfectly. You've been enabling her for years, even when it cost me everything. You took my savings, my work, my name. Tell me, what else are you planning to steal? The room went still. Only the ticking of the old wall clock filled the silence. Then Mom laughed, a dry, bitter sound. You think you're some kind of victim? We gave you everything, your education, your career, your apartment, paid with family money. My salary, I corrected. Every cent I earned went into that account. You just managed to convince yourself it was yours. Her eyes narrowed. After everything I've done, this is how you repay me? By dragging us through court? I met her gaze steadily. No. This is how I stop letting you walk over me. For a long moment, none of us spoke. Renee's shoulders shook, but she didn't look at me. When she finally whispered, her voice cracked. You don't have to destroy us, Lila. I looked at her, softer now. I'm not destroying us, I'm just done pretending we were whole. Dad finally spoke, his voice low. Maybe we should, Mom cut him off with a sharp glance. Enough. Then she turned back to me. If you want a war, you'll get one. I smiled faintly. Then I'll see you in court. As I walked out, my hands were steady for the first time in weeks. Outside, the rain had stopped. The air smelled of wet earth and pine, clean and sharp. I breathed it in like oxygen after suffocation. When I got home that evening, I found an envelope slipped under my door. No return address. Inside was a single photograph, Renee and me as children, sitting on the back porch, our knees scraped from playing tag. On the back, someone had written in neat handwriting, "She's not who you think she is." I stared at the photo for a long time. The edges trembled in my hands. It was Mom's handwriting, or Dad's. It looked like my father's sister, Aunt Marisol, who'd cut contact years ago after some mysterious fight with my mother. A cold ripple crawled through me. Not who I think she is? What did that mean? I looked again at Renee's smiling face in the picture. For the first time, I noticed something. Our eyes weren't the same shade. Hers were lighter, flecked with green like Mom's. Mine were dark, like Dad's. Maybe it was coincidence, maybe not. but something inside me whispered that this was only the beginning, and whatever secret my family had buried, it was about to surface. I slipped the photo into my journal, closed the cover, and whispered to myself, "Let's find out what you've been hiding." That night, I drafted a list on the back of an old receipt: freeze joint accounts, file intellectual property claim, talk to Aunt Marisol. At the bottom, I added one more line, underlined twice: expose the truth. 2 days later, I drove across the city toward Tacoma, where Aunt Marisol had lived for as long as I could remember. We hadn't spoken in nearly a decade. When I was a teenager, Mom used to call her unstable, dramatic, someone who fed on gossip. I'd believed her back then. But now I wasn't sure who had been lying to whom. Marisol's house was small, painted turquoise, with vines crawling up the porch railings. When she opened the door, her face softened immediately. "Lila Delgado," she said, almost in disbelief. "You look just like your father when he was your age." I hadn't expected warmth, but she pulled me into a hug before I could even speak. The smell of jasmine and coffee filled the air. "I didn't know where else to go," I admitted, voice small. She gestured for me to come in. "That's what family's for, Mija, the real kind." We sat at the kitchen table. I pulled the photograph from my bag and slid it toward her. "You sent this, didn't you?" Her eyes flicked to it, then back to me. "I did. I wasn't sure if you'd come." "What did you mean? She's not who you think she is?" Marisol sighed, rubbing her temples. "Your mother will hate me for saying this, but you deserve the truth." I leaned forward. "Please, just tell me." She hesitated, then spoke slowly, like each word cost her something. "Renee isn't your father's daughter." The world tilted slightly. "What?" "She was born a year after your parents separated. Briefly, your mother had someone else. When she came back to Carlos, she was already pregnant. He agreed to raise the baby as his own for the sake of the family. But Alina was terrified anyone would find out, so she started compensating, spoiling Renee, protecting her, pretending perfection would make the lie disappear. I felt the air leave my lungs. Everything started fitting together like puzzle pieces that had been upside down. The favoritism, the guilt, the silence from Dad whenever Mom raised her voice. It all made sense now. "She built her whole life around a secret," Marisol continued. "And she resented you because you looked too much like him, Carlos." A reminder of the truth she wanted to bury. I gripped the edge of the table, my knuckles white. "Does Dad know I know?" "He knows you'll find out eventually. He called me last week. He said you were in trouble, that Alina had gone too far. He didn't ask me to tell you, but I think he wanted me to." I sat there numb, staring at the photograph between us. The edges curled slightly where my fingers had pressed too hard. My mother's obsession with appearances wasn't just control, it was fear. She spent 27 years hiding the cracks in her perfect image, and I'd been punished for being the piece that didn't fit. Marisol reached over and touched my hand. "You're not crazy for feeling what you feel, Lila. Sometimes love in that house was more like currency. You gave, and she took until you were empty." I swallowed hard. "I thought I was the problem, that I wasn't enough." "You were too much," she said softly. "Too honest, too real for her illusion." The words hit something deep inside me, anger, yes, but also relief. For the first time, I wasn't confused about why I'd always been the outsider. I'd just been the only one who wasn't built on a lie. When I left her house, the sun had already dipped low behind the pines, painting the sky in bruised purples. The air smelled of salt and smoke, the sea nearby restless against the docks. I sat in my car for a while, letting the truth settle like sediment after a storm. My phone buzzed. A message from Dad. "Can we meet?" Alone, I hesitated, then replied, "Tomorrow, noon." That night, I couldn't stop thinking about Renee. Did she know? Or had she been living in the same lie all this time, believing she was loved for who she was, not for the secret she represented? Maybe that was why she clung to everything that used to be mine, the ring, the job, even Mark. Because deep down, she was terrified that without taking what I had, she'd have nothing of her own. But I wasn't going to carry that burden anymore. I walked to the window. The reflection staring back at me was calm now, steady, the kind of calm that comes right before you start rebuilding. I opened my journal and wrote one sentence across the page. "The truth isn't revenge, it's reclamation." When I closed it, I felt lighter, not because the pain had gone, but because I finally understood its shape. Tomorrow, I would face my father. And then, I would face her. Not as the obedient daughter. Not as the victim, but as the woman they had underestimated for far too long. The next day, I met my father at a small diner near the harbor. It was the kind of place he liked: quiet, old-fashioned, with the smell of bacon grease and black coffee clinging to everything. When I walked in, he was already there, sitting in a corner booth with 2 mugs and a plate of untouched pancakes. He looked older than I remembered. Or maybe I was just seeing him clearly for the first time. "Hey, Dad." "Lila." His voice was soft, tired. "Thanks for coming." I sat across from him. Neither of us touched the coffee. The silence between us was thick but not entirely hostile. It felt like the calm after a long storm before the next one rolled in. "I went to see Aunt Marisol," I said finally. He closed his eyes for a moment as if bracing for impact. "I figured you might. She told me everything." He didn't ask what she'd said. He just nodded slowly. "I didn't want you to hear it from her." "But your mother, she wouldn't let me tell you." "So it's true?" "Yes." His voice broke slightly. "Renee isn't mine." The words hung in the air, heavy and irreversible. "Why didn't you say anything?" I asked. "Why stay in that house, pretending?" He rubbed his hands together. "Because I loved your mother once, and because I loved you, leaving would have meant losing you too." "That's not love," I said quietly. "That's surrender." He didn't argue. "Maybe. But I thought keeping the peace was better than breaking the truth wide open. I see now I was wrong." I leaned forward. "Did you know about the money, the stolen designs?" He shook his head, eyes wide. "No, God, Lila, I didn't. Your mother said she was helping Renee start a business. I didn't know she took it from you." I believed him. Not because he deserved it, but because the pain in his eyes was real, the kind of pain that comes from realizing too late what you've enabled. "I'm done being the quiet one," I said. "I'm freezing the accounts, filing charges if I have to, and I'm going public about the stolen work." He nodded slowly like he knew there was no stopping me. "Just be careful, your mother's not rational when she feels cornered." "She's been cornering me my whole life," I said. "Maybe it's time she sees what it feels like." When I left the diner, the air outside was sharp and clean, the kind that wakes you up. I felt lighter, not happy, not yet, but focused. Purpose is heavier than anger, but it gives you somewhere to go. Back at home, my inbox was full messages from reporters asking about the viral LinkedIn post I made a few days ago. I hadn't used names, but apparently the story of a stolen design by a trusted relative had struck a chord. People were speculating, connecting dots. A few even guessed right. My phone buzzed again. A new email from an unknown address, "Stop before you regret it." No signature, no subject line, just that. I laughed bitterly. "Nice try, Mom." I took screenshots of the message and forwarded them to Samantha, my lawyer. Her reply came 5 minutes later. "We'll add intimidation to the list. Stay calm." That night I couldn't sleep. I kept seeing Renee's face at the party, pale, trembling, terrified not just of me, but of something deeper. Maybe she already knew the truth. Maybe she'd known all along who she really was. At 2 a.m., I drove back to the old neighborhood. The Delgado house stood dark, the porch light flickering weakly like a heartbeat on its last pulse. My old bedroom window was lit. Someone was inside. I parked across the street and watched. A shadow moved behind the curtains, slender, deliberate. Then the light went out. For a moment, I thought I saw a second figure, taller, broader, my mother and someone else. I told myself I was being paranoid. Still, the image burned behind my eyelids all night. The next morning, Samantha called. Bank responded. "They froze the joint account and flagged your mother for unauthorized use. You're legally protected now." "Good," I said, pacing the kitchen. "And there's more. Amber & Co. just retracted the design submission. They said it was a misunderstanding that the architect in question resigned yesterday." "Renee? She quit." "Looks that way, but Lila, be careful. If she's desperate, she might do something stupid." I exhaled, half relief, half dread. She's been doing stupid things her whole life. After the call, I opened social media. Renee's engagement post was gone, so was her profile photo. It was like she'd vanished overnight. Then came the knock at my door. It was her. She stood there in the same beige coat she'd worn at the party, makeup streaked, eyes red from crying. She looked small, smaller than I'd ever seen her. "Can I come in?" she whispered. I hesitated, then stepped aside. She sat on the edge of the couch, wringing her hands. "I didn't know you'd find out about the money." "Mom said it was temporary." "Temporary theft," I said. "That's new." Her lip trembled. "I didn't take the designs to hurt you. I needed something that was mine. Every time I try to make something, you've already done it first." I stared at her, the anger draining into something colder. "That's not an excuse. You could have asked for help." "Mom said you wouldn't." I laughed softly. "Of course she did." Renee looked up, eyes glossy. "You hate me." "I don't," I said truthfully. "But I don't trust you, and I'm done fixing things you break." She nodded slowly, wiping her face. "You think you know everything, but there's more. Mom, she's been planning something. She said she'd take care of it if you kept pushing." "Take care of what?" Renee hesitated, eyes darting toward the door like she regretted coming. "You should just stop, Lila, before she really does something you can't undo." "Tell me what she said." Renee shook her head. "I can't. She'll cut me off too." "She already has," I said. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The silence between us felt like an open wound, then she stood abruptly. "I just wanted to warn you." She walked toward the door, stopped, then whispered, "She's not afraid of you, she's afraid of what you'll find." And then she was gone. I stood in the doorway long after her footsteps faded. Somewhere in that house, my mother was spinning her next web. But this time, I wasn't the fly. That evening, I drove to my office, needing to clear my head. I flipped through project files, sketches, invoices, anything to distract myself. That's when I found it, an envelope tucked into my desk drawer with no name. Inside was a photocopy of an old document, property transfer agreement, dated 2005. The signature at the bottom read, "Carlos Delgado to Elena Delgado, sole ownership of Lakeside Estate." I frowned. The house had always been in both their names. Why would Dad give it up entirely? And then I saw the notation in the corner, "Transfer executed under confidentiality clause, reason undisclosed." My pulse quickened. Confidential clause. What reason could justify hiding that? I snapped a photo and sent it to Samantha. "Can you check this?" Her reply came quick. "That clause looks suspicious. There's probably an unrecorded amendment, maybe linked to inheritance or debt. I'll dig." I leaned back in my chair, the document still in my hand, and realized something chilling. My mother hadn't just stolen money. She'd been moving assets for years, reshaping ownership like a quiet storm. And my father, he'd been signing away pieces of himself without ever knowing why. Whatever truth was buried under that house, it wasn't just emotional. It was legal, tangible, maybe even dangerous. As the city lights flickered outside my window, I whispered to myself, "All right, Mom, let's see how deep your foundations really go." The next few days blurred into one long loop of phone calls, documents, and silence. I barely ate, barely slept. My apartment looked like a war room, papers taped to the walls, yellow notes linked by red lines like a crime scene. In a way, it was one. I was building the blueprint of my mother's deceit. Samantha kept digging into the property transfer while I combed through years of bank statements, tax records, and emails. What I found didn't surprise me anymore, but it still managed to sting. Every large deposit I'd made into the family fund had been withdrawn within weeks, labeled under vague notes like home repairs, Renee's education, medical costs. None of those repairs existed, and Renee hadn't taken a class in years. But what caught my eye was a recurring payment to a private account under the name Marion Ellis, $10,000 every quarter for almost 15 years. I didn't recognize the name, but the pattern was too deliberate to ignore. I called Samantha immediately. "Can you trace a beneficiary named Marion Ellis, linked to my mother's old accounts?" "Already on it," she said, a pause. "But Lila, this is turning into something bigger than just a family dispute." "I know," I said quietly, "and I'm not stopping." While waiting for her updates, I drove back to Lakeside Avenue. The house looked different now, not the safe, warm home from childhood memories, but a facade of perfection holding secrets behind its polished windows. I parked down the street and just watched for a while. The curtains twitched. Someone was home. I almost left, but then the front door opened. My father stepped out, startled when he saw me. He motioned for me to come closer, glancing nervously toward the windows as if afraid my mother might appear. "Why are you here?" he whispered. "I need to see the house records, the transfer from 2005. You signed it, right?" He hesitated. "Your mother said it was a refinancing, something about protecting our credit after Renee was born." "After Renee was born," I repeated, the words sour on my tongue. "So that's when it started." He rubbed the back of his neck. "Lila, I didn't know everything back then. Your mother handled the lawyers. She said it was temporary. I didn't ask questions I should have." "You trusted her," I said softly. "We both did." He looked at me with a sadness I couldn't carry for him anymore. "She's not evil, Lila, just afraid. Afraid enough to steal from her own daughter. She thinks she's protecting something." That was the thing about my father. He could always find gentleness where none was left, but I'd run out of that luxury. "Do you still have the lawyer's name?" I asked. He nodded slowly. "I'll find it for you, but be careful." "If Alina finds out, she already knows," I said, "and she's watching every move I make." That night, Samantha called again. "Got a hit on your mystery woman. Marion Ellis is an alias." "Who's?" "Elena Delgado," my breath caught. "You're kidding." "No, she created a secondary identity around 2005. It's tied to offshore accounts in the Cayman Islands. Looks like she's been moving small amounts of money there for years under the radar. Combined, it's over $2 million. For a moment, the room tilted. $2 million, gone into a shadow name. Samantha's voice pulled me back. If she transferred the property too, that house might already be listed under the alias. That means, legally, she could sell it without your father's consent. I pressed a hand against my forehead. She's planning to disappear. Or start over, Samantha said grimly. Either way, she's been preparing this for a long time. After the call, I walked to the window. The city lights blurred through the drizzle, everything glowing gold and distant. I thought I was fighting for fairness, but this wasn't about fairness anymore. It was about survival, mine and my father's. The next morning, I confronted him again. We met in the park away from the house. He looked exhausted, his hands shaking as he handed me a folded paper. The lawyer's name was Thomas Bergman. He handled everything for her. Thank you, I said. He hesitated. Lila, she's been different lately. Jumpy. Secretive, I think she knows you're onto her. She should be scared, I said, slipping the paper into my coat. She's losing control. That evening, I drove to Bergman's office downtown. The receptionist recognized my last name immediately. You're Alina's daughter, right? Yes, I need copies of any property or asset transfers she made under your firm. She hesitated. I'll have to check if I'm allowed to. She's under investigation, I lied smoothly. It would be better for your firm to cooperate. 15 minutes later, I was holding a thin folder labeled Confidential Delgado Estate. Inside were copies of the transfer papers, notarized signatures, and one sealed envelope marked Addendum, private to client. I stared at it for a long moment. The paper felt heavier than it should have. When I got back to my car, I broke the seal. Inside was a handwritten note from my mother to the lawyer. Thomas, this must remain between us. The property and all assets need to be secured under Marion Ellis until the situation with the inheritance is resolved. Carlos can never know the full reason for the transfer. Nor can Lila. This is not about greed, it's about blood. My hands trembled as I read it again. Blood. I sat there for several minutes, the world narrowing to that single word. Blood. There was only one thing it could mean. I called Samantha, voice low. My mother mentioned an inheritance situation. Something about blood. Could there be a hidden trust? Possible, she said. If your grandfather left assets with specific bloodline conditions, that might explain the secrecy. So Renee wouldn't qualify, I whispered. Exactly. If she's not Carlos's biological child, she'd be excluded from anything tied to his bloodline. Alina could be trying to protect her by hiding or redistributing the assets. I closed my eyes. It all fit. The favoritism, the manipulation, the desperate need to control every penny. She wasn't just trying to erase me emotionally. She was rewriting the family ledger to make sure Renee inherited everything. I felt cold, not angry, just hollow. My entire life had been one long performance orchestrated by a woman terrified of losing her illusion. By midnight, I was back at my apartment, staring at the scattered papers across the floor. I poured myself a drink, but the glass stayed untouched. I couldn't stop thinking about one thing: blood. She built her empire on a lie, and now that lie was starting to crack. I opened my journal again, the same one where I'd written the truth isn't revenge, it's reclamation. Underneath, I added, if blood built this house, truth will tear it down. And then, as if summoned by the thought itself, my phone rang. Unknown number. When I answered, there was silence at first. Then a voice, low, trembling. Lila, it's Dad, you need to come. Now something happened. I didn't even ask what. The tone in his voice told me enough. When I reached the house, police lights flashed against the trees. My heart dropped. Dad stood on the porch, his face ashen. She's gone, he said. Your mother, she took Renee. The car's gone, she left a note. He handed me a crumpled piece of paper. My mother's handwriting, neat and controlled as ever. Don't follow me. You've done enough damage. Some truths should stay buried. For the first time since this started, I felt fear, not of her, but of what she was capable of when cornered. The storm outside grew louder. The wind howled through the trees, shaking loose the last yellow leaves. And for the first time, I realized I might not just be fighting for justice anymore. I might be fighting for survival. The house was chaos that night. Police officers moved through the hallways, their radios crackling, the smell of wet leaves and engine oil filling the air. I stood on the porch, soaked and shaking, watching as an officer took my father's statement. His hands trembled while he talked, his eyes hollow. I'd never seen him look so small. She took the Lexus, he said quietly. Packed a suitcase for both of them. No passports, just cash. She's done this before, disappeared for a few days when things got hard, but never like this. I stared out into the rain, the red and blue lights washing across the driveway. She's not running from you, Dad. She's running from the truth. He didn't answer. The officer closed his notebook and gave us both a sympathetic nod before heading back to his car. When the flashing lights finally faded down the road, the silence that followed was unbearable. Inside, the house felt colder than ever. Every photo frame on the wall looked staged now, our family smiles brittle, rehearsed. I walked through the kitchen, tracing the edges of the counter where I used to do homework while Mom cooked. It didn't feel like home anymore. It felt like evidence. I found another note on the table, folded neatly beside her half-empty wine glass. It wasn't a message to me. It was a receipt, withdrawal of $80,000 in cash, signed under the alias Marian Ellis. The timestamp was just 3 hours before she left. "She's heading for the border," I said. "Cayman or Mexico. She's got offshore accounts waiting." Dad ran a hand over his face. "I can't believe she'd take Renee. She'll do whatever it takes to keep Renee out of reach. If the truth comes out, Renee loses everything, legally, financially, maybe even emotionally. Mom's protecting her, but it's not love anymore, it's fear." He slumped into a chair, looking at the floor. "I did this," he murmured. "I let it go too long." "No," I said softly. "She made her own choices. You just gave her room to make them." The next morning, Samantha met us at the house. Her hair was pulled into a tight bun, her expression sharp. "I contacted the authorities about the offshore accounts," she said. "We can freeze them temporarily, but we'll need your father's cooperation." He nodded immediately. "Whatever it takes." Samantha laid out the papers on the table, warrants, forms, legal jargon that made my head spin. But the more I read, the more the shape of my mother's world came into focus. Shell companies, false trusts, and property transfers that looped around like a maze built to confuse anyone who tried to trace her steps. Then Samantha pointed to one file. "This one is strange. It's a separate trust created in your name, Lila, but the beneficiary isn't you." I frowned. "What do you mean?" She turned the document toward me. "The trust is titled the Delgado Air Fund. It was created 18 years ago by your grandfather, but your mother changed the beneficiary in 2005 from you to Renee." My breath caught. "That's illegal." "She forged the amendment," Samantha said grimly. "We can prove it. The signatures don't match your grandfather's originals, but it explains everything, why she's been funneling money offshore, why she panicked when you started asking questions." Dad looked like someone had punched him. "She changed the heir to a child who isn't even mine." I nodded slowly. "To hide it, she had to erase me." He sank back into his chair, staring at his hands. "My God, she's been planning this for years." The realization hit both of us like a wave. Every slight, every manipulation, every "you're overreacting" suddenly became part of a larger pattern. She hadn't just been cruel, she'd been strategic. Samantha packed her files. "We'll file a motion tomorrow morning. Once the forgery is proven, the trust reverts to you, but you should prepare for backlash. When someone like your mother feels her empire collapsing, she'll burn everything around her to the ground." "I'm ready," I said, even though my voice trembled. That evening, Dad and I sat together in silence for a long time. He poured whiskey into 2 glasses and handed me one. We'd never done that before, shared a drink like equals. It felt strange, almost sacred. "I should have told you the truth sooner," he said finally. "You didn't owe me perfection," I said. "Just honesty." He smiled sadly. "You sound like your mother when we first met. She hated lies. Funny how life turns people inside out." We clinked glasses without another word. The next morning, I woke to my phone buzzing nonstop. Dozens of missed calls, messages, notifications. My stomach sank as I opened one of them, a news alert. Seattle architect accused of embezzling family trust. Below it, a photo of me leaving the courthouse last week. "What the hell?" I whispered. I scrolled down. The article quoted an anonymous family source claiming I had stolen funds from my parents' estate. Screenshots, doctored bank statements, fake timestamps. My mother's handiwork. I called Samantha immediately. "She's framing me." "I see it," Samantha said. "We can disprove it easily, but she's moving faster than we thought. This isn't just about hiding, she's going on offense." "She always does," I said bitterly. "She's trying to ruin me before I can expose her." As if on cue, my phone buzzed again, Mom's name. For a moment, I just stared at it, my reflection trembling in the screen, then I answered. "Lila." Her voice was calm, too calm. "Where are you?" I demanded. "That doesn't matter. I see you've been busy dragging our family through the mud. You did that yourself when you forged Grandpa's will. Be careful what you accuse me of," she said. "You don't know everything." "I know enough. I know Renee is Dad's daughter. I know you stole his house. I know you built a fortune on lies." Her voice sharpened. "You think this is about money, about property? You have no idea what's at stake." "Then tell me," I said. "Tell me what's at stake." She hesitated just long enough for me to hear her breathing shake. "Renee's sick," she said finally. The word stopped me cold. "What?" "She's been sick for years. The inheritance, the transfers, everything I did was to protect her, to make sure she could afford treatment when I'm gone." I froze, the room tilted slightly. "You expect me to believe that?" "It's the truth," she whispered. "She doesn't even know. She has a rare autoimmune condition, something genetic." "Genetic?" I cut in. She's not even Dad's child. That's why I couldn't tell him, she said. It came from her real father. He died before she was born. I thought I could fix it. I thought if I built a future for her, it would balance everything I'd done. For a long time, neither of us spoke. I could hear her breathing, shallow and uneven. Finally, I said, "You destroyed me to save her." "I saved you both," she said quietly. "You just don't see it yet." The line went dead. I sat there for a long time, the phone still in my hand. Somewhere deep inside, under the anger and exhaustion, a small part of me felt something I hadn't expected: pity. If what she'd said was true, then everything, every lie, every theft was born from fear of losing another child. It didn't justify it, but it explained it. When Samantha came by later that night, I told her everything. She nodded slowly. "We can verify the medical claim. But even if it's true, it doesn't erase what she did." "I know," I said, "but it changes how I'll end this." "How so?" "I'm not just going to expose her," I said. "I'm going to make her face herself." Samantha looked at me for a long moment, then nodded. "Then we do it your way." After she left, I sat by the window again, watching the rain start to fall. My reflection in the glass looked stronger than I felt. I whispered to the girl who used to crave her mother's approval more than her own peace. "You were right, Lila," I said softly. "Sometimes blood really does stain." And as thunder rolled in the distance, I realized that for the first time in my life, I wasn't afraid of the storm anymore. The storm lasted all night. By morning, the sky over Seattle was a dull silver sheet, the kind that makes every color look washed out. I hadn't slept. My father crashed on the couch, an empty glass still in his hand, murmuring in his sleep like a man haunted by ghosts he couldn't name. Samantha called early. "We traced one of the offshore withdrawals," she said. "Your mother wired a large amount to a clinic in British Columbia 2 days ago. It's a private facility, expensive, discreet. If she's telling the truth about Renee's illness, that's where they are. Send me the address." "Lila, wait, you can't just show up. If she feels cornered again, she could disappear for good." "I'm not going to threaten her, I just want to see the truth with my own eyes." Samantha sighed. "I'll meet you there in the afternoon, just be careful." The drive north was quiet. The highway cut through endless pine forests, wet asphalt glistening beneath the overcast sky. Every mile closer felt heavier, like the road itself resisted letting me reach the end. I tried to picture what I would say to her, but my mind kept circling back to one question. Was it possible to hate someone and still understand them? By the time I crossed into Canada, the clouds had begun to break. The clinic sat on a hill overlooking a lake, its white walls almost blending into the fog. Modern, sterile, peaceful, like the kind of place people went to erase their pain. At the reception, a woman in a gray suit greeted me politely. "Good afternoon. Can I help you?" "I'm looking for my mother, Elena Delgado, or she might be registered under the name Marian Ellis." The receptionist's expression flickered. "One moment, please." She disappeared into an office, then returned a few minutes later with a guarded smile. "I'm afraid we can't disclose patient information." I expected that. I slid my ID card across the counter. "I'm her daughter, and I have legal authorization to access her records." It was a bluff, but I delivered it like fact. She hesitated, then nodded reluctantly. "Wait here." When she came back, she handed me a visitor badge. "Room 214, down the left corridor." My hands were sweating. I walked slowly, the air thick with disinfectant. The hallway was quiet except for the faint hum of machines behind closed doors. When I reached the room, I paused before knocking. For a moment, I just listened, soft voices inside, one of them unmistakably my mother. I pushed the door open. She was sitting by the window, her posture still regal even in exhaustion. Renee lay in the bed behind her, pale, an IV drip attached to her arm. She looked smaller, fragile, almost translucent against the white sheets. My mother turned, her face calm but her eyes sharp. "You shouldn't be here." "I needed to see for myself," I said quietly. Renee stirred. "Lila." Her voice was barely a whisper. I moved closer, my throat tightening. "Hey, little sister." Mom stood, stepping between us instinctively. "Don't upset her." "I'm not here to fight," I said. "I just want the truth." She looked at me for a long moment, then gestured to the chair beside her. "Fine, sit." I sat. The steady beep of the heart monitor filled the silence. "She was diagnosed a year ago," Mom said finally. "An autoimmune condition that attacks her own cells. It's rare and aggressive. She needs constant treatment. That's why I moved the money, why I changed the trust. If I told your father, he would have cut her off. You would have asked questions. I did what I had to." "You built it all on lies," I said. "You could have told me." Her eyes hardened. "Would you have understood? You've always been so righteous, so eager to divide everything into right and wrong. But life isn't architecture, Lila. It doesn't stay upright just because the lines are straight. The words hit deeper than I expected. For a moment, I almost saw her again, the mother who used to braid my hair before school, who made coffee the same way every morning, humming old Spanish songs. But then I remembered the years of silence, the neglect, the stolen work, the theft. Lies don't save people, I said. They just bury them slower. She turned away. You sound just like your father. Maybe that's the best part of me, I said. Renee stirred again, her voice trembling. Mom, stop, please. Her eyes fluttered open fully now, focusing on me. I didn't know any of this, she whispered. Not until we left. She told me you were trying to destroy us. I thought you were, Mom said, almost defensively. I thought she'd go to the press, expose everything. I was, I admitted, but not anymore. Both of them looked at me, startled. I'm not here for revenge, I said. I'm here to end this, to stop pretending we're some perfect family built on broken glass. Mom's lips parted, but no words came out. Samantha entered quietly then, having arrived moments later. She gave a small nod at me before addressing my mother. Mrs. Delgado, you should know that the trust documents you altered have been suspended. The accounts are frozen. You can't access the offshore funds anymore. My mother stiffened, then sat back down slowly, as if the weight of years had finally caught up to her. So it's over, she whispered. No, I said gently. It's just finally honest. For the first time, I saw something flicker behind her eyes, not anger, not defiance, but exhaustion. Pure human exhaustion. Renee began to cry quietly. I never wanted any of this. I didn't ask for the money or the party or, she broke off, coughing. I moved closer and held her hand. I know you don't have to explain. Mom looked at us, really looked for the first time in years. And in that silence, something inside her seemed to collapse. Samantha broke the moment softly. Mrs. Delgado, if you cooperate, we can settle this privately. No criminal charges as long as restitution is made. Mom nodded faintly. Do whatever you have to, I'm tired. When we left the clinic later, the sun was setting over the lake, casting long ribbons of orange light across the water. My father waited in the car outside, gripping the steering wheel like a lifeline. When he saw me, he got out immediately. Well, he asked. They're safe, I said. Renee's sick. Mom's surrendering. He nodded slowly, eyes glassy. Then maybe we can finally breathe. But I wasn't sure breathing would be that easy. The truth might have freed us, but it had also left a hole where trust used to be. That night, I sat on my balcony overlooking the city lights. Samantha called once more. The clinic confirmed the diagnosis, she said. Your mother wasn't lying, but there's more. You're listed as Renee's emergency donor match. I blinked. Donor match for what? They haven't requested anything yet, but her condition could worsen. If it does, you might be her only compatible donor. My throat tightened. So after everything she's done, she might still need me. That's your choice, Samantha said gently. No one can force you. After the call, I sat in silence, the city humming below me. For the first time in weeks, I didn't feel anger. Just a strange, fragile ache, the kind that comes when the war ends and all that's left is the wreckage. I thought about Renee's small hand in mine, the way she'd looked at me in that hospital bed, guilty, scared, but still my sister. And my mother sitting by the window, her armor finally cracking. Maybe this wasn't the ending I wanted, but maybe it was the one we needed. The truth hadn't fixed us. It had only revealed what was broken. And maybe that was the first step toward healing. I whispered into the night, almost to myself. The foundation's shattered. Now it's time to rebuild. And for the first time, those words didn't sound like revenge. They sounded like peace. The following week felt like walking through smoke after a fire. The chaos had quieted, but everything still smelled of ashes. The media finally stopped calling after Samantha released an official statement clearing my name. All allegations against Ms. Delgado were fabricated, the press release said. Ongoing investigations have confirmed identity fraud and forgery by a third party. They never said her name, but everyone knew. The comments online were a mix of sympathy and spectacle. Can't believe your own mom did that. This is why I don't share bank accounts with family. Stay strong, girl, rebuild yourself. The support felt strange, comforting, yet invasive. Strangers dissecting my life like an open wound. At work, people avoided eye contact for a few days. Then they slowly began treating me like I hadn't just been the center of a scandal. David, my boss, called me into his office. Take some time off if you need to, he said. What you've been through would break anyone. I'm fine, I told him. I need the work. It keeps me from thinking too much. He nodded, though I could tell he didn't believe me. At night, I visited my father. The house was quiet without my mother's perfume, without Renee's laughter echoing down the hall. It didn't feel like victory. It felt like a mausoleum. Dad tried to fill the silence with conversation. "They'll be back eventually," he said once halfway through dinner. "Maybe after things settle." I didn't respond. I didn't know which part of things he meant, the lies, the money, or the years of pretending we were happy. He took a sip of wine and studied me. "You know, I'm proud of you," he said. "For standing up, I never could." "You could have," I said quietly. "You just didn't." He looked down at his plate. The clink of his fork was the only sound between us for a long time. After dinner, I went upstairs to my old room. The walls were still blue, but they felt smaller now. On the desk was a small box wrapped in brown paper. A note rested on top in my father's handwriting, "For when you're ready to forgive." I hesitated before opening it. Inside was an old photo album, me as a child, Mom holding me on her lap, Dad standing behind her. In the last page pocket, folded carefully, was a letter. I sat on the edge of the bed and began to read. "Lila, if you're reading this, it means everything's come apart and you finally know the truth about your mother. But there's another truth I've kept from you too, one that might make you hate me or maybe just understand me better. The Delgado estate, your grandfather's inheritance, it was never supposed to go to me. I wasn't his biological son. I was adopted when I was 6. Elena knew, but she married me anyway. When her father left the trust to my bloodline, we both knew it excluded me. That's why she did what she did, because she thought she had to protect Renee, and maybe even you, from losing everything. I didn't stop her because deep down, I felt like I didn't belong in that line either. I don't expect forgiveness. I just needed you to know the foundations were cracked long before you noticed the cracks. Love, Dad." I read it twice, then a third time. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. All this time, I thought my mother was the only one who'd built her life on lies. But now I realized both of them had been hiding, him behind silence, her behind control. And somehow I had inherited both. When I went back downstairs, he was sitting on the porch, staring out into the dark yard. "You read it," he said softly. "Yes." He didn't look at me. "I tried to protect you from all this. I didn't want you to carry it." "You should have let me choose," I said. "Truth hurts less than betrayal." He nodded slowly. "You sound like your mother again." The irony wasn't lost on either of us. Later that night, Samantha called. "We've confirmed the trust reversion," she said. "You're officially the legal heir to the Delgado estate. The assets are clean now." I stared at the papers she'd emailed over, millions in property and savings that didn't feel like mine. "What about Renee?" "She's still under medical care. Your mother agreed to a restitution deal in exchange for reduced charges. She'll have limited access to funds for Renee's treatment under your oversight." "My oversight?" I repeated. "Yes, you're effectively her guardian, at least financially." I laughed softly, the sound sharp. "After all this, she still finds a way to make me responsible for her." Samantha didn't answer. Maybe she knew there was nothing left to say. The next morning, I met my father at a notary office to finalize the estate papers. He signed quietly, his signature trembling. When it was my turn, my pen hovered above the line for a long moment. Signing meant more than accepting property. It meant accepting everything that came with it. The history, the rot, the guilt. Finally, I signed. When we left the building, Dad exhaled deeply as if releasing something he'd carried for decades. "You did the right thing," he said. "Maybe," I said, "but it doesn't feel right." That night, I drove to the lake. The water was calm, the surface reflecting the bruised colors of dusk. I parked by the pier, stepped out, and breathed in the cold air. It smelled like rain and pine and endings. I opened my phone and drafted an email to my mother. "Mom, the trust is restored. Renee's treatment is secured. I'm not pressing further charges. But you need to understand this isn't forgiveness, it's closure. You once said life isn't architecture, that straight lines can't hold. Maybe you were right, but even crooked walls can stand if the foundation is honest. Lila." I hit send before I could second-guess myself. The wind picked up, carrying ripples across the lake. Somewhere behind me, I heard footsteps on the gravel. I turned. It was my father holding 2 mugs of coffee. "Figured you'd be here," he said. I smiled faintly. "You always do." He handed me a mug and sat beside me on the pier. For a long time, we didn't speak. The sky darkened, the stars coming out one by one. Finally, he said, "You know, when I first built this dock, your mother said it would never hold through the winter. But it did. Every storm, every flood, it stayed standing." "Why?" I asked. "Because I used too much steel," he said, chuckling. "Overbuilt it. She thought I was crazy." I smiled, tracing my finger along the wood grain. "Maybe that's what we have to do sometimes, overbuild to survive the damage." He nodded. "You got that from me?" "Maybe," I said. "But I'm learning how to rebuild differently." We sat there until the coffee went cold. Somewhere across the lake, I imagined Renee asleep in her hospital bed, my mother watching over her, both of them trapped in their own kind of silence. I didn't know if we'd ever be a family again. Maybe we were never one to begin with. But for the first time, I wasn't chasing it anymore. When I got home that night, the city lights glowed through the fog like scattered embers. I turned off my phone, poured a glass of wine, and stood by the window. For once, the quiet didn't feel empty. It felt earned. But just as I started to breathe easier, a small envelope slid under my door. No address, no name, just my own handwriting across the front. I picked it up slowly, heart thudding. Inside was a photograph, my parents on their wedding day. And behind it, scribbled in faded ink, "You're not the only one she lied to." The handwriting wasn't my father's. It wasn't my mother's either. It was my grandfather's. And suddenly, everything I thought I'd uncovered felt like the surface of something deeper. The photograph wouldn't leave my mind. I sat at my kitchen table long after midnight, turning it over and over, studying every inch. The ink was faded, but the handwriting was unmistakable, sharp, deliberate, old-fashioned. My grandfather. He died when I was 10. I barely remembered his voice, only his presence. Stern, quiet, smelling of tobacco and cedarwood. He was the kind of man who didn't need to speak to command a room. Mom had always said he was traditional, which in her language meant dangerous. But if this note was real, it meant one of two things. Either someone had faked his handwriting with impossible precision, or my grandfather had left a message meant to be found years after his death. I needed answers. The next morning, I went to my father's house. He looked tired but alert, as if he hadn't slept either. I handed him the photo. He stared at it for a long moment. "Where did you get this?" "It was slid under my door last night. There's a message on the back." He flipped it over, reading the words silently. When he finished, his face drained of color. "Jesus," he whispered. "You recognize it. It's his handwriting, no doubt, but that's impossible. He's been dead for 17 years. Could someone have kept it? Maybe Mom?" He shook his head. "No, your mother burned everything that had his name on it after he passed. Letters, documents, even his journals." "Then who?" I asked. He didn't answer immediately. His eyes shifted toward the window, unfocused. "There was one person who might have kept something," he said slowly. "His lawyer, Thomas Crane. He handled the estate back then." "Is he still alive?" Dad nodded. "He'd be in his late 70s now. Last I heard, he retired to Bainbridge Island." That was all I needed. By noon, I was on the ferry, the cold wind biting my face. The island looked like a postcard, pine trees leaning over gray water, houses hidden behind mossy stone walls. But beneath its calm surface, I felt something heavy waiting. Thomas Crane's house sat on a hill overlooking the bay. The door creaked open before I even knocked. An old man in a wool sweater studied me with cautious eyes. "Ms. Delgado?" he said. "Or should I say the granddaughter? You knew I was coming," I asked. He smiled faintly. "Your grandfather always said you'd show up one day. Come in." The house smelled like paper and dust. Bookshelves lined the walls, filled with folders and ledgers. He led me to a small study where a fire crackled quietly. "I suppose you found the note," he said, sitting down. "He left it to be delivered under specific conditions." "What conditions?" "That the Delgado estate would fall apart," he said simply. "That the truth would resurface." My heart pounded. "What truth?" He reached into a drawer and pulled out a weathered envelope. My name was written across it in the same sharp hand. "He left this for you. I was instructed to hold it until your 28th birthday, or until the family's inheritance was legally disputed. Seems both happened close together." I took the envelope carefully. "Did you ever read it?" He shook his head. "That wasn't my place. But I'll say this, your grandfather wasn't a kind man, but he was a man obsessed with control. If he wrote you, it means he expected you to rebuild what he thought everyone else destroyed." I left without another word. Back on the ferry, I sat by the window, staring at the waves, the envelope heavy in my hands. It felt like holding a loaded gun, something that could destroy or define me, depending on how I used it. When I finally opened it, the paper inside was yellowed and brittle. The first line stopped me cold. "Lila, my blood and my legacy, if this reaches you, then the family name has fractured as I always feared. My blood, you were born into deceit. Your mother was never meant to raise you. I arranged your birth to protect what was mine. Elena was chosen not for love but for loyalty. She agreed to take you as her own after your real mother, my housekeeper, Teresa, died giving birth. I erased the records. Your father knows nothing. Only I and Thomas carried the secret." The words blurred for a moment as my brain tried to reject them. My pulse roared in my ears. The Delgado fortune was built to endure through my line alone. I could not risk outsiders or illegitimate claims. But if you are reading this, then the family has already turned to dust. The legacy is yours to reclaim, but only if you understand one thing. Loyalty is stronger than love, and blood is just proof of ownership. I let the letter fall to the floor. My entire body went numb. I wasn't her daughter. I wasn't his granddaughter. I wasn't even who I thought I was. By the time I got back to Seattle, the sun was setting again. I drove straight to my father's house, the letter still trembling in my hand. He opened the door before I knocked. One look at my face and he knew. "What did you find?" I handed him the letter. He read it slowly, his expression tightening with every line. When he finished, he sat down heavily. "So that's it," he said quietly. "That's why she hated him so much, why she hated you." "She knew?" I asked. "Of course she did. She never said it out loud, but I saw it in the way she looked at you sometimes, like you were a mirror she couldn't break." I sank into a chair, staring at my hands. "Everything we fought about, everything she did, it all came from this." He nodded. "You were a reminder of what she lost and what she could never control." The silence between us stretched thin. "Finally," I said, "he called me his blood, but I don't even know who that makes me." Dad looked at me with eyes full of sorrow. "It makes you mine," he said simply. That broke me. I covered my face with my hands, and for the first time since this began, I cried, not the controlled tears of anger or exhaustion, but the kind that come from finally understanding how deep the damage runs. When I could speak again, I whispered, "He wanted me to rebuild his legacy, to carry his name." "Then don't," Dad said firmly. "Don't let any of them define you, build your own." It was such a simple answer, and yet it felt like the first truth anyone had ever given me. Later that night, I took the letter and burned it in the fireplace. The flames ate the paper greedily, curling the words into smoke. When it was gone, I whispered, "No more ghosts." But as the ashes settled, my phone buzzed. A new message, unknown number. "You think the truth ends with him? You still don't know what she did to keep you." Attached was a photograph. It was my mother, young, standing in a hospital corridor, holding a newborn baby. The timestamp was from the day I was born, but the tag on the crib behind her didn't say Lila Delgado. It said Baby Teresa M, and suddenly I knew my mother hadn't just hidden my origin. She had stolen me to save me from something worse. The past wasn't finished. It had just changed form. I couldn't sleep after that photograph. It sat open on my screen, glowing faintly in the dark room. My mother, Elena, looked so young, so radiant. Her smile wasn't the cold, rehearsed one I knew. It was something else, relief, maybe even love. But behind her, the crib tag told a different story. Baby Teresa M, the letter from my grandfather, still echoed in my mind. Elena was chosen. Chosen for what? To raise me? To hide me? To protect me? Or to keep me as proof of his control? By dawn, I made my decision. I needed to see her again. The clinic in British Columbia wasn't answering calls anymore. The line rang, then cut. I drove anyway. The road was long and gray, lined with mist that seemed to move with me. When I arrived, the receptionist hesitated as soon as she saw my face. "She checked out," she said softly. "Yesterday, with her daughter." "Do you know where they went?" She shook her head. "She didn't say, but she left something for you." She handed me a sealed envelope, heavier than I expected. My name written across the front. Lila. I tore it open right there in the lobby. Inside was a single photograph and a note. "If you're reading this, you've already learned what he did. You were never supposed to find out this way. Come to the house by the cliffs, the one we used to visit in the summers. There's one truth left you need to hear." I drove for hours along the coast, the rain chasing me the entire way. The house by the cliffs was a summer home we hadn't visited in nearly 15 years. Back then it had felt magical, with its creaky porch and sea-salted air. Now it looked haunted, its windows boarded, the paint peeling like dead skin. Her car was parked outside. I stepped out, my boots sinking into the wet sand. The wind howled against the cliffs, waves crashing far below. The door was unlocked. Inside, the air smelled of damp wood and salt. A single light glowed from the living room. She sat there, wrapped in a shawl, a cup of tea untouched beside her. Renee was asleep on the couch, pale but breathing. "I knew you'd come," she said without turning around. "Then you know why I'm here." She gestured to the chair across from her. "Sit. You deserve the truth, even if it kills me to say it." I sat, my hands were shaking. "Who am I, Mom?" She exhaled slowly. "You're mine, maybe not by blood, but in every way that matters." "That's not what I asked." Her eyes glistened in the lamplight. "Your real mother was Teresa Morales. She worked for my father for years. Treated her like property, controlled her, humiliated her. When she got pregnant, he panicked. She wanted to keep you, he wanted her gone." My throat closed. "Gone?" "He arranged for her to be sent away. The night you were born, she hemorrhaged. I was there, I saw her die, and before she did, she begged me to save you." "So you took me," I whispered. "I stole you," she corrected, voice trembling. I signed the papers myself, erased your birth name, made you mine. Your grandfather called it containment. He said I could raise you as long as I stayed loyal. I thought I could protect you from him. But the moment I agreed, I became just like him, hiding, lying, controlling. The truth hit like a wave breaking inside my chest. All these years, I said, you made me believe I was the problem, that I wasn't enough, but you were the one living in fear. She nodded slowly. I was, every day. He ruined all of us, Lila. He taught me that love was weakness. I tried to prove him wrong, but I only passed the damage to you. Why didn't you ever tell me? Because I didn't want you to hate him the way I did. I didn't want you to inherit my anger. The irony of her words made me laugh bitterly. Too late. She didn't argue. The room fell silent except for the sound of waves crashing below the cliffs. Renee stirred in her sleep, mumbling something unintelligible. She doesn't know, does she? I asked. No, Mom said softly. And she never will. She doesn't need to carry this. I leaned back in the chair, staring at her. So what now? We just live with it. She looked at me, eyes hollow. No, Lila, you live past it. You build something better. That's the only way any of this means something. Her voice cracked then, and for the first time in my life, I saw her cry, really cry, not from frustration or rage, but from guilt so raw it stripped her bare. I didn't save you to own you, she said. I saved you because you were innocent. Because I couldn't let him destroy another child. I swallowed hard, my chest tight. I don't know if I can forgive you, I said honestly. She nodded. I don't expect you to. I just hope someday you'll understand. I stood. You're turning yourself in tomorrow. Her eyes widened slightly, but she didn't argue. I know. I'll make sure Renee's safe, I said. You'll serve your sentence, and maybe after that, we'll figure out who we are without all the lies. She gave a faint smile through her tears. You sound like her, you know, Teresa. She had that same fire. I froze. You knew her well? She was my best friend before she became my father's victim, she said. You remind me of who she used to be before he broke her. The words settled between us, heavy and final. I turned to leave, but her voice stopped me. Lila, she said, don't let his legacy define you. Burn it all down if you have to. I nodded once, then walked to the door. Outside, the wind had died down and the ocean was calm again. The first light of dawn crept over the horizon, painting the waves in silver. I stood there for a long moment, feeling both emptied and filled at once. When I looked back, I saw her silhouette through the window, small, fragile, yet strangely peaceful. The next morning, she turned herself in. No drama, no lawyers, no spectacle, just quiet acceptance. Samantha handled the paperwork. My father didn't come. Renee cried until her voice broke. At the courthouse steps, I stood watching as the officers led her away. She turned her head once, caught my gaze, and mouthed a single word, free. It wasn't about herself. It was about me. Later that week, I visited Renee at the hospital again. She looked better, stronger. When I entered, she smiled faintly. Mom told me you found out everything. Yeah, I said softly. Everything. She reached for my hand. Are you okay? I thought about it for a long moment before answering. I think I'm finally becoming okay. She nodded, tears filling her eyes. I'm glad. You deserve peace. I squeezed her hand. So do you. Outside, the rain had stopped and sunlight streamed through the glass. For the first time in years, the world didn't feel hostile. That night, I drove back to the cliffs one last time. The sea was quiet. The house was empty now, but it no longer felt haunted. I stood there, letting the wind whip through my hair, and whispered into the dusk. You didn't save me from the truth, Mom, but you gave me the strength to face it. And for once, that felt like enough. The courthouse steps felt strangely quiet after she was gone. Reporters lingered behind the barricades, shouting questions I didn't answer. Cameras flashed, microphones extended, but their voices were just noise, distant, hollow. I walked to my car without looking back. By the time I reached home, exhaustion hit me like a wave. The adrenaline that had carried me through weeks of chaos finally drained away, leaving nothing but a deep, aching emptiness. I stood in the kitchen, staring at my reflection in the dark window. I didn't recognize the woman staring back, older, sharper, but somehow lighter too. For the first time in months, I made myself dinner. Just something simple: pasta, garlic, olive oil. The normalcy of it felt almost sacred. No courtrooms, no lawyers, no family secrets, just the sound of water boiling and a quiet apartment that finally felt like mine. But peace, I was learning, has a strange way of testing you. A few days later, Samantha called. The judge approved your mother's plea deal, she said. She'll serve time, but not long. Medical leniency, cooperation, all that. It's as gentle an outcome as we could hope for. I'm fine with that, I said. I don't need her to suffer. I just need the truth to stop haunting me. She also asked me to give you something, Samantha added. There was a pause. She left a box in the evidence locker, said you'd know when to open it. I met her at the courthouse that afternoon. The box was small, wooden, carved with initials, E.D. Elena Delgado. My chest tightened as I lifted the lid. Inside were only two things, a silver locket and an old cassette tape. The locket was familiar. I'd seen it once when I was a child. She used to wear it every Sunday, then one day it just disappeared. I opened it slowly. Inside were two photos, one of me as a baby and one of a young woman I didn't recognize. Her smile was soft, her eyes kind. On the back in fading ink was a single word, Teresa, my mother's best friend, my birth mother. I closed the locket gently, then looked at the cassette. There was a label on it, written in my mother's handwriting, for her. Samantha raised an eyebrow. "Do you even have something that can play this?" I smiled faintly. "Maybe in my dad's garage." That night, I dug through old boxes until I found his dusty cassette player from the 90s. The thing barely worked, but when I pressed play, it whirred to life with a faint hiss. Then her voice filled the room. "Lila," she began, her tone steady but soft. "If you're hearing this, it means I'm gone or close to it. I never wanted you to learn our story through lawyers and letters. You deserve to hear it from me." I sat on the floor, eyes closed, listening. "I took you because I couldn't stand by and watch another innocent pay for my father's sins, but I didn't steal you out of pity, Lila. I took you because the first time I held you, I felt something I'd never felt before, peace. I spent years trying to control everything so I wouldn't lose it, but control isn't love. It's fear dressed up as protection." Her voice cracked slightly. "I kept Teresa's photo all these years because she reminded me of who I wanted to be: brave, kind, forgiving. I failed her and I failed you too, but maybe you'll break the pattern. Maybe you'll learn that forgiveness isn't surrender, it's freedom." The tape ended with silence. I sat there for a long time, the sound of the cassette spinning softly until it clicked off. I didn't cry this time. I just breathed. For once, that was enough. A week later, Samantha arranged the transfer of my inheritance. "Everything is now legally under your name," she said. "The properties, the accounts, the holdings your grandfather established. It's all yours, Lila." I stared at the stack of documents, uneasy. "It feels wrong." "Why?" "Because it's blood money," I said. "Built on lies and pain. Every brick of that estate has someone's suffering in it." "Then change what it stands for," she said simply. "Money's just a tool. What you build with it is up to you." That night, I walked through the Delgado estate for the first time since it became legally mine. The grand house on the hill still smelled of the past, wood polish, ocean air, and the faint ghost of my mother's perfume. In my grandfather's old study, I found something unexpected. Behind the bookshelf, a hidden panel I'd never noticed. Inside was a locked safe, small and old, its edges rusted. The key was taped beneath the desk drawer. Inside, there were dozens of envelopes, each marked with a year. The last one was labeled 2025. This year, my breath caught. Inside that envelope was a single page of typed words: "To the rightful heir of Delgado Holdings, if you are reading this, then the company and its name are yours. But understand this, what we built was never meant to last. It was born from exploitation, maintained through silence. Every generation must choose, continue the lie or dismantle it. If you choose to end it, sell everything. Donate it. Burn it down if you must. Only then will the curse end." No signature, but I knew whose words they were, my grandfather. For the first time, I didn't feel anger reading him, just clarity. He had known, even in his cruelty, that the empire he built was poisoned. He just didn't have the courage to destroy it himself. The next morning, I called Samantha. "I'm selling everything," I said. "All of it? All of it. The properties, the shares, the estate. I'll keep one thing, the house by the cliffs. The rest goes to charity. Half for women's shelters, half for education grants under Teresa Morale's name." Samantha was quiet for a moment, then she said softly, "That's poetic, Lila." "It's justice," I said, "the kind that actually means something." It took weeks to finalize. Papers signed, assets transferred, accounts emptied. The press spun stories of the heiress who gave it all away, but I didn't read them. I didn't care. The point wasn't spectacle, it was release. One night after everything was settled, I drove back to the house by the cliffs. It was late, the moon hanging low over the ocean. The wind carried the smell of salt and pine, and for the first time I didn't feel afraid of it. I placed the locket on the windowsill, Teresa's face on one side, mine on the other, and whispered, "It's done." Somewhere deep inside, I could almost hear both of them, Elena and Teresa, whispering back, "Good." Then I closed the door and walked away, leaving the ghosts to rest where they belonged. The house by the cliffs became my refuge. Without furniture, without servants, without noise, it felt honest. I spent my mornings watching the tide roll in, my evenings reading books that had nothing to do with law or architecture or legacy. For the first time in my life, no one expected anything from me. Freedom, I realized, is terrifying at first. You think you've been craving it your whole life, but when it finally comes, it feels too quiet, like standing in a vast field after a storm, unsure what to rebuild first. I started small. I painted the kitchen walls pale yellow. I fixed the broken railing on the porch myself. I planted rosemary and lavender in the back garden because they reminded me of the housekeeper, Teresa, my mother, in another life. Sometimes I caught myself humming the lullaby she used to sing, the one I didn't even remember learning. It came back to me like muscle memory, like something buried deep in my blood. One afternoon, while clearing out the attic, I found an old drafting board, the same kind I'd used when I was a student. The sight of it made my hands itch. I set it up by the window and began sketching again. Not skyscrapers or offices, homes. Simple, sturdy, full of light. Houses meant to be lived in, not shown off. Days blurred into weeks. Renee called often. She was still in treatment, still fragile, but her voice grew stronger every time. "Mom writes me letters from prison," she said once. "She sounds different, softer." "She always had that in her," I said. "It just got buried." "Are you going to see her?" "Someday, not yet." Renee paused. "She keeps saying she's proud of you." I smiled faintly. That makes one of us. When Samantha visited a few weeks later, she found me barefoot, covered in paint, sketching blueprints on the kitchen table. "You look different," she said. "I feel different." She glanced at my sketches. "You're designing again?" "Not for money," I said. "For purpose." She smiled. "You know, I think your mother would have liked that." "Maybe, or maybe she would have tried to control it," I said with a small laugh. "But I'm done designing my life for anyone else." That night, I walked to the edge of the cliffs and looked out at the ocean. The moon was high, silver on the waves. I thought about how many times I'd stood in this exact spot, angry, confused, desperate for answers. Now I just felt still. Healing, I'd learned, isn't about forgetting. It's about accepting that the past won't apologize and deciding to live anyway. In early spring, I got an invitation from a women's shelter in Seattle. They wanted to name their new wing the Delgado Foundation Home for Survivors. Funded, of course, by the trust I donated. They asked me to speak at the opening ceremony. My first instinct was to say no. I wasn't ready to be the face of redemption, not after everything. But then I thought about what Samantha said, change what it stands for. Maybe this was how. The day of the event, the building was alive with color, bright murals, open spaces, sunlight spilling through tall windows. The kind of place that felt like hope made physical. When it was my turn to speak, my hands trembled slightly. I looked out at the audience, women of all ages, some holding their children, some holding each other. Survivors, fighters, believers. "My name is Lila Delgado," I began. "I used to think my story was about revenge, about getting back what was taken from me, but I was wrong. It's about learning that sometimes justice isn't about punishment, it's about breaking the cycle." The room was silent. My family built its fortune on control and silence. For generations, we were told that blood defined worth, that money could buy safety. But what I've learned is this: love without truth is just another prison, and freedom without compassion is just another kind of loneliness. I paused, meeting their eyes. I don't know what comes next for me. Maybe I'll keep designing homes. Maybe I'll stay by the ocean. But I do know this: I'll build my life the way my mother never could. Not on fear, on honesty. Applause filled the room, soft at first, then stronger, warmer. I felt tears sting my eyes, but this time they weren't from grief. After the event, a woman approached me. She was older, maybe in her 60s, with gentle eyes. "I knew Teresa," she said quietly. I froze. "You did?" "She was kind, brave. She talked about you before she passed, said you'd grow up to change things." My chest tightened. "Thank you," I whispered. She smiled. Looks like she was right. That night, I drove back to the cliffs. The sea was calm, the stars scattered like silver dust across the sky. I sat on the porch with a cup of tea, listening to the waves. For the first time, I felt something like belonging, not to a family, not to a legacy, but to myself. I thought about all the versions of me that had existed: the obedient daughter, the angry victim, the avenger, the orphan of secrets. They all lived inside me, but none of them ruled me anymore. My phone buzzed. A new message from my mother. "I heard your speech. I'm proud. You made something good out of what we broke. I'll see you when the tides change." I smiled. It was the first time her words didn't sting. Before going inside, I stood by the railing and whispered into the wind, "We're free now." The ocean didn't answer, but the silence felt like agreement. The first time I visited my mother in prison, the sky was the same shade of gray as the walls that surrounded her. It had been 6 months since the trial. I had spent those months building, designing, breathing. But some things don't heal by themselves. Some wounds have to be seen to close. When I entered the visitation room, she was already there, thinner, quieter, her hair streaked with silver. The fluorescent lights above her buzzed faintly, the sound sharp against the silence. She smiled when she saw me, tentative, like she wasn't sure if she was allowed. "You look good," she said softly. "So do you," I lied, sitting across from her. For a moment, neither of us spoke. We just studied each other, two women with the same eyes but different hearts. Finally, she broke the silence. "I saw the shelter on the news, what you did with the money." "It wasn't mine to keep," I said. "It was your choice, and that's what makes it yours." I hesitated. "I listened to the tape." Her smile faded. "Then you know everything." "I do," she nodded, looking down at her hands. "I used to think control was power. That if I could just hold everything together, the money, the family, the secrets, it would make me safe. But it didn't, it made me small." I watched her carefully. There was no performance this time, no armor, just regret. "I forgave you," I said quietly, her head lifted, eyes glistening. "You did." "Yes, but not because you earned it, because I needed to stop carrying you around like a wound." Her lips trembled and she laughed softly through tears. "You always were stronger than me." I smiled faintly. I learned from the best and the worst. We talked for a while after that, about Renee, who was healing, about my father who had sold his share of the company and moved to a small town near the mountains, about the ocean, the cliffs, the house that now stood as a monument to both our mistakes and our survival. Before I left, she reached across the table and handed me something wrapped in tissue paper. "I made it in the workshop," she said. "We get an hour every day." I unwrapped it slowly. It was a small clay sculpture, rough, imperfect, but clearly made with care. A lighthouse, its base cracked but standing tall. "It's beautiful," I whispered. She smiled. "I figured you'd understand the symbolism." "I do," I said. "A light that stands even in storms." When the guard came to escort her away, she squeezed my hand. "Thank you for coming, Mija." "I'll come again," I said. She nodded, tears in her eyes. "When the tides change." I left the prison with the sculpture in my hands, the wind cool against my face. For the first time, the weight of her story didn't crush me, it grounded me. She wasn't the monster I had imagined in my darkest moments. She was just a woman who lost herself trying to protect something she didn't know how to love. Back home, I placed the clay lighthouse on the windowsill beside the silver locket. Teresa's face smiled up at me from inside the pendant, her soft eyes forever young. Next to her, the lighthouse caught the morning sun, its cracks glowing like veins of gold. Renee moved in with me a month later after finishing her final round of treatment. The doctors said she was stable. She wanted to study art therapy to help kids process trauma through color and form. I helped her enroll. One night, we sat together on the porch, wrapped in blankets, the ocean whispering below. She leaned her head on my shoulder. "Do you think Mom will ever come home?" "She will," I said. "Not the same way, but she will." We watched the moon ripple across the waves, and for a moment everything felt still. Not fixed, not perfect, just still. In the months that followed, life began to settle into something that looked like peace. I started a small design studio with Samantha, Rebuild Studio, we called it. Our focus wasn't luxury or profit, but homes for women starting over. Survivors, single mothers, anyone who needed a space to begin again. Every blueprint I drew carried echoes of my past. Open windows, sturdy foundations, light that reached every corner, spaces that didn't hide. Sometimes, when the wind was right, I thought I could hear my mother's voice through the sound of the waves, not in words, but in rhythm. A lullaby turned into the hum of the tide. I used to believe revenge would make me whole. That justice meant watching those who hurt me fall apart. But what I learned instead is that justice without compassion only breeds more ruin. I was born from deceit, raised in control, and reborn through forgiveness. That was my legacy, not the name Delgado, but the woman I chose to become after it all burned down. One evening, I stood by the lighthouse again, the real one this time, at the edge of the cliffs. The sun dipped below the horizon, turning the sky gold and crimson. I held the clay lighthouse in my hands, its surface warm from the light. I whispered, "For you, Teresa. For you, Alina. For me." And then I placed it on the rocks near the water's edge, where the waves could touch it but never take it away. When I turned back toward the house, the windows glowed like lanterns. Inside, Renee was painting, her laughter drifting through the open door. For the first time, I didn't feel like a survivor of my story. I felt like the author of it. It's been a year since the night I found out my family threw a party without me. A year since I opened my phone and saw my mother's words, "The right daughter finally got her happy ending." Funny how one sentence can crack open everything you thought you knew about love, loyalty, and blood. I used to replay that moment every night before bed, the sting, the humiliation, the disbelief. But somewhere along the way, it stopped hurting. It became just another scene in a story that doesn't own me anymore. Now, my mornings begin with quiet. The ocean hums against the cliffs, the kettle whistles softly, and the air smells like lavender from the garden. Renee still lives with me. She's healthier now, her cheeks full of color again. Sometimes she paints by the window while I work on blueprints. We don't talk much while we work, we don't need to. There's an understanding between us now, the kind that doesn't require words. She once told me, "You and Mom built me from opposite sides of the same pain." And I think she was right. Some weekends, I visit the women's shelter. The walls there are covered in bright murals, waves, hands reaching, a sun breaking through storm clouds. Each time I walk through those doors, I see pieces of myself in every woman who sits there, the fear, the anger, the will to begin again. And each time I leave a little lighter because I know we're all rewriting our stories in our own ways. One afternoon, I met a young woman at the shelter named Emily. She couldn't have been more than 20. Quiet, cautious eyes. She just escaped a controlling relationship and didn't believe she could stand on her own. I helped her design her first apartment layout, 1 bedroom, small balcony, lots of light. She laughed when I insisted on a wide window in the kitchen. "You'll want to see the sunrise," I told her. She looked at me like I was crazy. "Why?" "Because even if your day goes to hell, you'll know you started it with something honest." A few months later, she sent me a photo, her standing in front of that window, smiling, the sunlight pouring over her like gold. No words, just that image. It was the most beautiful thank you I'd ever received. Sometimes I think of my mother. She's still serving her sentence, but her letters come often. They're gentler now, written in a tone I never knew she had. She talks about the prison garden she tends to, how the tomatoes actually taste sweet when they grow from something broken. She never asks for forgiveness again, she just tells me stories about the women she helps inside. It's strange, she's more of a mother to others now than she ever was to me, and I think, in a way, that's her redemption. The last letter she sent had one line that stayed with me: "You were never the right daughter, Lila. You were the honest one. That's harder." I keep that letter folded inside the locket, next to Teresa's picture. The two women who shaped me, one by giving me life, the other by almost destroying it. I used to wish I could erase both of them from my DNA, but now I see they're the reason I learned to build something real from ruins. Rebuild Studio is thriving now. We don't just design houses, we rebuild lives. Every project is a story: a mother and her son escaping violence, a teenager leaving foster care, an old woman reclaiming her independence. And in every wall we raise, in every foundation we lay, there's a piece of my past turning into something good. People sometimes call me a survivor. Others call me brave. I don't think I'm either. I think I just refuse to stay silent. Because silence, I've learned, is how the cycle keeps spinning. It's what allowed my grandfather to control everyone. It's what kept my mother chained to his lies. And it's what almost convinced me that my worth depended on how much love I could earn from people who couldn't give it. Now I speak, even when my voice shakes. Especially then. One evening, not long ago, I got a call from the prison. My mother had collapsed during her shift in the garden. The warden said she went quickly, peacefully. She was smiling, he said something about the tide finally turning. I drove to the coast that night. The ocean was wild and alive, waves crashing against the rocks like applause from ghosts. I stood there with the locket in my hand and whispered, "It turned, Mom, it really did." I buried her ashes beside the lighthouse, the clay one she made me, not the real one. I didn't want monuments, just a small place where the sea could reach her and the sun could find her every morning. Renee and I watched the tide come in. She slipped her hand into mine. "Do you think she's free now?" she asked. "I think she always was," I said. "She just didn't know how to stop fighting herself." When we left, the sky was streaked with orange and violet. I remember thinking how grief, when it's ready, doesn't feel like pain. It feels like gratitude. That night, back at home, I sat by the window of my studio. The city lights shimmered in the distance. My sketchbook lay open on the desk, blank, waiting. I traced my fingers over the empty page, thinking of all the things I could draw: a house, a bridge, a sunrise. But instead, I wrote, "The night my family erased me was the night I started writing myself back." It wasn't revenge that saved me. It wasn't even justice. It was remembering that I had a voice, one that didn't need permission to exist. If someone asked me now what I'd tell the girl I used to be, the one crying over that Facebook post on her 28th birthday, I'd say this: One day, you'll understand that being forgotten by them was the best thing that ever happened to you, because that was the day you finally remembered yourself. I close the notebook, take a deep breath, and let the sound of the waves fill the silence. The tide is rising again, washing the shore clean. And for the first time, I don't look back.